Rich millionaire brings mistress home and replaces his wife. Now he's desperate to get her back. Anthony Lancaster had it all: wealth, power, and a beautiful wife who stood by him through every triumph and setback. But when he brought his mistress home, replacing the woman who had built his empire by his side, he thought he was trading old love for new passion. He believed he had made the ultimate power move. What he didn't realize was that he wasn't just losing a wife, he was losing the one person who truly knew him. And when the world he so carefully crafted begins to unravel, he finds himself desperate for something money can't buy: a second chance. But some betrayals are unforgivable. And sometimes the one you push away is the one you'll regret losing forever. Stay with me, because this is a story of love, betrayal, and a fall from grace that no one saw coming. Anthony Lancaster was known throughout the bustling city of Lexington Heights as the epitome of success and affluence. He had come from humble beginnings, building his empire of luxury hotels, high-rise condominiums, and upscale restaurants one painstaking step at a time. For the last decade, Anthony had stood at the pinnacle of achievement, gracing the covers of business magazines and rubbing shoulders with billionaires, once even sharing a private lunch with Bill Gates in Seattle to discuss potential philanthropic ventures. Yet behind the glittering facade was a man whose personal life was rapidly unraveling. At the center of his world was his wife, Sophia Lancaster, an elegant, poised woman who had supported him from the day he decided to open his first boutique hotel. At one point, their love seemed unbreakable, forged in the flames of adversity when they'd had barely enough money to pay rent. But power, wealth, and temptations had corroded Anthony's convictions. He found himself entranced by the allure of a younger woman, Carla Moreno, whose intoxicating presence upended everything he cherished. The story of how Anthony Lancaster brought his mistress home, effectively displacing his wife, only to realize his devastating mistake too late, reverberates through the social circles of Lexington Heights to this day. While few know the full account, whispers of betrayal, cunning manipulation, and heartbreak ripple across the corridors of high society. This is a tale not just of romance gone awry, but of redemption sought in the unlikeliest of places. What follows is the complete, unvarnished story of how Anthony's world, and everyone within it, changed forever. Anthony Lancaster had everything money could buy: a lavish mansion in Lexington Heights, holiday villas in the south of France, and an impressive collection of sports cars that seemed to grow larger every year. He also shared a long-standing marriage with Sophia, an inseparable partnership that had survived countless trials. However, with success came new stresses: an ever-expanding schedule of business travels and invitations to elite events where beautiful, charismatic people hovered like moths around the flame of his wealth and influence. It was at one such event, a late-night fundraiser hosted at the Palomino Hotel in Miami, that Anthony first encountered Carla Moreno. She was a rising star in the modeling world, sporting a sky-blue evening gown that clung to her slender frame. He'd just finished speaking with an old friend, Viktor Morozov, an investor who had introduced him once to Elon Musk in a private pitch meeting, and was making his way back to the bar when he noticed Carla standing alone. She sipped a glass of champagne, her dark eyes scanning the crowd with a bored expression. Something in the way she carried herself drew Anthony in. Perhaps it was the mixture of vulnerability and intense confidence. Sophia was in Lexington Heights that weekend, busy with a charity event of her own, so Anthony found himself drifting over to the mysterious woman by the bar. He struck up a conversation, offering to buy her a drink, and she responded with a knowing smile. Carla's father, a minor European aristocrat from Spain, had apparently lost his fortune years ago. Carla told the story with a detached calm that hinted at private pain. She had come to America hoping to find opportunity and success in modeling. "And maybe," she'd said, swirling her champagne, "someone who can help me navigate these dangerous waters." Her eyes flicked meaningfully to Anthony's, and in that moment he felt a shiver of forbidden intrigue course through him. Sophia had always been the center of his universe, but here, amid the flickering lights of the fundraiser, was someone who seemed like a mirror of his own ambitions, hungry, cunning, and yearning for more than what life had dealt her. Over the next few weeks, Carla became an unspoken fixture in his private hours. Anthony would fly her out to remote locations under the guise of business and arrange exclusive photo shoots through his PR connections. There was an electric thrill in their clandestine meetings, stolen touches in secluded corners, whispered phone calls in the dead of night, and illicit text messages that made his heart race like a teenager's. Sophia, ever trusting, believed Anthony's increased travel schedule was due to his escalating business empire. She was the charitable soul, spending her time organizing fundraisers, volunteering at local shelters, and writing heartfelt letters to potential donors for her philanthropic causes. The deception weighed heavily on Anthony at first. He would lie awake next to his unsuspecting wife, torn by guilt, questioning whether his life had gone off track. But inevitably, in the harsh light of day, Carla's magnetism drew him back. He justified it to himself, rationalizing that everyone in my position has these temptations. Months slipped by in this manner, each new day weaving a thread of secrecy into the tapestry of his once honest life. Carla demanded more of his time, more of his resources, and more of his emotional commitment. Soon it wasn't enough for them to meet in hidden locales. She wanted recognition, to be seen in public with him, to stand by his side. Anthony found himself torn between the stability and love of Sophia and the intense burning spark Carla ignited. Then came a moment that would change it all. One evening, Sophia returned from a friend's baby shower to find Anthony pacing anxiously in the living room. He had insisted she come home early, and his unusual urgent tone over the phone left her nerves on edge. When she walked in, she noticed he looked pale, like he hadn't slept in days. The entire house seemed to hum with unspoken tension. Before Sophia could even set down her purse, he said, "We need to talk." They took a seat in the formal living room. Anthony cleared his throat. He had planned a carefully worded confession, something that would minimize the damage, but the truth, once it began to spill, possessed a momentum of its own. He admitted he had been seeing Carla Moreno for several months, that Carla had become someone important to him. The color drained from Sophia's face as he spoke, and she struggled to keep her composure. How could you do this?" she asked, her voice trembling despite her best attempt at steadiness. Anthony mumbled something about their emotional distance, about how he felt neglected while she focused on charities. It was a cheap excuse, and they both knew it. The flicker of heartbreak in Sophia's eyes told him he had crossed an unforgivable line. Yet, rather than beg for forgiveness and promise to end the affair, Anthony made the catastrophic decision to double down. He confessed that Carla was planning to move to Lexington Heights, and that he wanted her near him, no matter the cost. Sophia couldn't believe what she was hearing. Outraged and devastated, she demanded he break off contact with Carla immediately, but to her growing horror, Anthony refused. He insisted he cared for Carla and wasn't willing to end it. A sickening realization washed over Sophia. Her husband wasn't just having an affair. He was thinking about rewriting their life entirely. Through tears, Sophia gave an ultimatum. "Either you end it with Carla and commit to counseling with me, or we're done." Anthony responded with a cold confidence that took her breath away. "I can't lose Carla," he said, his voice raw. "I want you to stay, Sophia, but things can't go back to how they were. If you can't accept this arrangement, I don't know what to tell you." She stared at him, her heart pounding in her chest, the reality of betrayal ripping through her. Never had she dreamed that the boy who once vowed everlasting love would stand before her and propose such a twisted scenario. A sob choked out of her throat, and she fled up the stairs, slamming the bedroom door behind her, where she cried until dawn. 3 days later, Sophia packed her essentials and left for her sister's home in Chicago. She refused to speak to Anthony, refusing even to answer his phone calls or messages. A single text came through from him on the day she left. "I'm sorry, but I need you to understand. Please don't do anything rash. I still love you." She deleted it without reply. Anthony, consumed by both guilt and defiance, told himself he was only following his heart. Or at least that's what Carla had whispered into his ear, insisting he deserved to be with someone who made him feel alive again. Determined to prove his love for Carla was more than a fleeting affair, he orchestrated her move to Lexington Heights, installing her in a luxurious penthouse downtown. Sophia was gone, and Anthony convinced himself he had taken the correct path, diving headlong into the web of Carla's charms. He didn't fully grasp it then, but in that moment he had set fire to a vow once cherished above all else. Weeks turned into months. Carla Moreno's arrival in Lexington Heights was anything but subtle. Anthony's PR team managed to keep gossip columns at bay for a time, but rumors began to spread that a mysterious woman, young, foreign and impossibly beautiful, had captured the heart of one of the city's wealthiest men. Even the staff in Anthony's mansion whispered about Carla's presence in hushed tones, glancing nervously around corners. Carla quickly embedded herself in Anthony's lifestyle. She accompanied him to glitzy galas, stepping out of limousines in designer dresses that Anthony paid for with a single swipe of his platinum credit card. She redecorated the penthouse to her liking, bringing in modern art and plush furnishings. She convinced Anthony to purchase a thoroughbred horse she'd admired at a charity auction in California, a sleek chestnut stallion named King's Ransom. "It's an investment," she purred, stroking the horse's mane, while Anthony watched with a mixture of apprehension and fascination. Meanwhile, the mansion that Sophia had once called home felt emptier by the day. Anthony couldn't bear to sleep in the master bedroom alone, so he retreated to a smaller guest suite, telling himself it was more comfortable. In truth, he couldn't face the haunting memories of Sophia's lingering fragrance in the master bedroom, nor the ghost of what their marriage had been. Guilt weighed heavily on him each night, even as he sent Carla playful texts and arranged for weekend getaways in exotic locales. Some nights, Anthony found himself standing alone in the living room, glass of whiskey in hand, staring at the grand piano Sophia used to play. She had a remarkable ear for music, and often spent her evenings composing short melodies, filling the cavernous mansion with warmth. Now the piano's lid collected dust, and the halls seemed to echo with a hollow hush. Carla, sensing Anthony's bouts of remorse, sought to distract him with lavish parties and social engagements. She introduced him to her circle of fashionable friends, artists, models, and influencers who thrived on the adrenaline of high society. Gatherings in Carla's penthouse became legendary, free-flowing champagne, imported delicacies, DJs flown in from Ibiza, and a guest list curated to include only the most glamorous individuals. Anthony would often find himself cornered by these socialites, who flattered him with compliments and flirtations as though he were the center of the universe. In the midst of these parties, Anthony would catch glimpses of Carla across the room, laughing easily with her new admirers. She moved effortlessly between them, her eyes alight with mischief, controlling the atmosphere as though she were the queen of some decadent court. It was a far cry from Sophia's quiet confidence and philanthropic heart. But as the days turned into a blur of opulence, Anthony began to notice subtle changes in Carla's demeanor. She became more demanding. Where once she had asked politely for modest help, like introducing her to photographers or setting up small modeling gigs, she now demanded the best agencies, the biggest runways, and the most exclusive endorsements. She insisted on attending every high-profile event Anthony was invited to, eventually overshadowing even his presence. Some of Anthony's business associates began asking, half-jokingly, if Carla was now running the show. Worse still, Carla seemed to become bored with Anthony's bouts of seriousness. When he lamented his guilt over Sophia, Carla would roll her eyes. "She left you, didn't she?" The door was always open for her to return, and she chose to walk away, she'd say dismissively, lighting a cigarette, despite Anthony's request that she not smoke indoors. "You belong to me now. You made your choice." Her words, so callous, stoked a small ember of resentment in Anthony. He bristled at her lack of empathy and her quickness to dismiss Sophia's heartbreak. A storm brewed within him, but every time he thought of confronting Carla, he recalled how much he'd already invested in their relationship, how many bridges he'd burned. He told himself it was too late to turn back. Pride, combined with shame, locked him into the life he had created. For a time, though, the facade held. The city's gossip columns printed stories about Anthony and Carla's whirlwind romance, sprinkled with sensational rumors about their lavish parties. Very few dared to ask directly about Sophia, either out of fear or courtesy, but her absence from Anthony's side was a glaring void. Anthony's own mother, Vanessa Lancaster, living in quiet retirement in a cottage by the sea, refused his calls, appalled by how he had treated Sophia. Some of Anthony's siblings also distanced themselves. In the new hush surrounding him, Anthony battled with the realization that the life he had wanted might no longer be the one he had ended up with. Far away from the sprawling mansion and the glossy parties, Sophia Lancaster found solace in the arms of her older sister, Melissa Park. Melissa's Chicago townhouse was modest but warm, filled with the aroma of home-cooked meals and the laughter of her two children, Jacob and Lily. Sophia tried to keep her composure for their sake, but nights brought floods of tears she could no longer hold back. Melissa did her best to console her sister, encouraging her to see a therapist and reminding her that she was not alone. Sophia spent her days in therapy sessions, penning emotional diary entries and attempting to rebuild her sense of self-worth. She also took on small contractual work with local charities, continuing her passion for helping others. In time, she developed a close friendship with one of her therapist's other clients, an older widow named Harriet Daniels, who facilitated group discussions for women going through divorce and betrayal. One day, Harriet organized a weekend retreat at a lakeside cabin in Michigan. Surrounded by a circle of women who had faced similar heartbreak, Sophia began to unearth her own resilience. The group practiced daily mindfulness, hiked through fall foliage, and shared vulnerable stories by a crackling fireplace. It was here that Sophia finally spoke the words she had been dreading. "I think my marriage is really over." As tears glistened on her cheeks, Harriet placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Your marriage might be over," she said softly, "but your life is just beginning." During the retreat, Sophia realized that her identity had long been entwined with Anthony's ambitions and successes. She had helped him build his empire, but in the process she'd buried her own dreams. The heartbreak of his betrayal was monumental, yes, but in that heartbreak a new door had opened, a chance for her to step into the spotlight of her own life. With renewed conviction, Sophia began crafting a plan. First, she wanted to revisit Lexington Heights to resolve the legal side of her separation, determine the distribution of assets, and clarify her future. She was no gold digger, but she refused to walk away from the life she had helped build with nothing. More importantly, she wanted to confront Anthony face to face, not for his sake, but for hers. She deserved closure, a final conversation that would let her bury the past and move forward. Yet as determined as she was, she could not quell the tremor of anxiety every time she thought of stepping foot in that grand mansion again. Memories of love, laughter, and eventually betrayal haunted her dreams. She would have to brace herself for seeing Anthony and possibly Carla in the home that she had nurtured for so many years. In a surprising twist, her old friend and legal advisor, Mark Beringer, reached out with an offer to help. He had once provided pro bono work for one of Sophia's charities and had always admired her unwavering dedication. On hearing about her troubles, Mark volunteered to guide her through the complexities of potential divorce proceedings. Sophia, initially hesitant, ultimately agreed. The support felt like a lifeline. 2 months after moving in with Melissa, Sophia steeled herself for a trip back to Lexington Heights. She would stay in a hotel, finalize her decisions with Mark, and decide once and for all the direction of her life. On a cold December afternoon, she boarded a train bound for the city that had once been her entire universe, unsure of what she might find. While Sophia was rediscovering her strength in Chicago, cracks were forming in Carla and Anthony's relationship in Lexington Heights. Carla's insatiable appetite for status and recognition led her to push Anthony harder and harder. She wanted him to buy her a sprawling estate rather than the penthouse. She wanted a new line of credit to support her budding fashion brand. She wanted a seat on the board of one of Anthony's companies, an outlandish demand that made even the loyal corporate attorney Jonathan Caldwell raise an eyebrow. Anthony, feeling the pressure, tried to appease her. He arranged meetings for her with top investors, introduced her to influential magazine editors, and showered her with expensive gifts. But the more he gave, the more Carla seemed to crave. Her nights out grew wilder, sometimes returning home well after dawn, with a gaggle of sycophants in tow. Anthony began receiving calls from enraged neighbors, complaining about the raucous parties at Carla's penthouse. When he confronted her, Carla laughed, calling him an old man for caring too much about what other people thought. Late one night, after a confrontation that ended with Carla storming out of the penthouse, Anthony decided to return to his mansion alone. He drifted through its silent corridors, recalling the last real conversation he had with Sophia here. Guilt washed over him like a tidal wave. He had driven away a woman who genuinely cared about him, who had supported him through every triumph and failure, and replaced her with a person who increasingly seemed more interested in his wallet than his heart. He wandered into the master bedroom, which he had largely avoided since Sophia's departure. He opened her closet, finding it still half filled with her belongings, vintage dresses, some formal gowns, even a pair of running shoes she loved. The faint smell of her perfume lingered on the clothes, and for a moment he felt her presence, like a comforting hand on his shoulder. A wave of regret and sorrow overcame him, and for the first time in years, Anthony Lancaster broke down, sobbing quietly into the empty room. In the days that followed, he tried to distance himself from Carla. He turned down some of her more outrageous spending requests and started missing events she insisted he attend. When Carla discovered he had secretly deposited a sum of money into a separate account, one that she had no control over, her anger was explosive. She accused him of no longer trusting her, of plotting to leave her for his precious Sophia. Their arguments escalated, and Carla made a dramatic display of packing her designer luggage, threatening to walk out for good if he wouldn't meet her demands. For a moment, Anthony almost wished she would walk out and never return, but pride, fear, and the lingering infatuation still held him back. He was too entangled in the web he had woven. The press, the city's elites, even his investors had grown used to Carla at his side. He dreaded the publicity nightmare that might ensue if Carla decided to publicly slander him, or worse, reveal the intimate details of their affair. He was exhausted by the constant drama, yet still he clung to the hope that he could somehow fix the mess he'd made. Meanwhile, a small part of him still yearned for Sophia, for her grace, her unwavering support, her tender smile. He knew she was no longer in the city, but every day he imagined what he would say if he could see her again. The heaviness of regret began to outweigh his fear of confronting the truth. Little did he know, Sophia Lancaster was already on her way back to Lexington Heights, ready to face him once more. Sophia arrived in Lexington Heights under a veil of winter clouds. Snow flurries dusted the city streets, adding a melancholic beauty to the place she used to call home. She checked into a modest suite at the Lancaster Grand, a luxury hotel Anthony had built early in his career, ironically named after himself. Feeling a pang of nostalgia as she passed the gilded lobby, she remembered the day the hotel first opened, how she and Anthony had stood side by side, greeting guests, both brimming with pride. Mark Beringer met her the next morning to discuss the path forward. Over coffee in the hotel's lounge, he explained her legal options, everything from reconciliation to a formal divorce. But as they talked, Sophia sensed a quiver in her heart. She had come here certain she wanted a divorce, yet the moment she set foot back in the city, old memories and emotions came flooding in. She needed clarity, a final conversation with Anthony to ascertain whether there was anything left worth saving. Mark arranged a meeting at the offices of Caldwell Associates, the law firm that also represented Anthony. The neutral territory seemed appropriate, a place of polished mahogany tables and quiet conference rooms, impersonal enough to keep tensions in check. On the day of the meeting, Sophia wore a simple black dress and a warm grey coat, appearing poised yet vulnerable. Her heart hammered in her chest when she saw Anthony waiting in the lobby. He stood up, eyes locking onto hers for the first time in months. She saw in his face an amalgam of regret, relief, and uncertainty. He looked thinner, with dark shadows under his eyes, as though he hadn't been sleeping well. Time had not been kind to either of them. "Hello, Sophia," he managed, voice wavering. She nodded in greeting, unsure if she trusted her voice to remain steady. Behind a conference table, flanked by Mark and Jonathan Caldwell, Anthony and Sophia took seats across from each other. No words were exchanged for a long moment, until Caldwell, in his measured tone, began outlining the agenda. A preliminary discussion about the marital assets, any spousal support, and the question of legal separation or divorce. "I'd like a private moment with my husband," Sophia said unexpectedly, voice quiet yet resolute. Caldwell hesitated, but eventually the lawyers stepped out into the corridor, leaving Anthony and Sophia alone. The silence between them crackled like static electricity. Finally, Anthony spoke. "Sophia," he said, eyes brimming with sorrow, I've missed you. I know that must sound ridiculous after everything I've done." She swallowed the lump in her throat. "I never wanted it to come to this," she said softly. "I loved you, Anthony, more than anything, and it killed me when you brought her into our life." He exhaled, his body visibly trembling. "I know. I've made the biggest mistake of my life. Carla, she's not what I thought she was. Or maybe she is. But I was just too blind to see." Sophia's eyes glistened with tears. "I'm not here to offer you salvation," she said, carefully choosing her words. "I'm here to decide if there's anything left to fight for." His gaze fell to the table. "I've wanted to see you every day since you left. I kept hoping you'd call, that you'd show up at the door, but I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness." He paused, drawing a ragged breath. "I want you back, Sophia." The words hung in the air. He reached across the table for her hand, but she pulled away reflexively. She was not ready to be touched by him, not yet. "Everything's changed," she murmured. "You think a few apologies can erase the betrayal, the humiliation?" Anthony shook his head. "No, but I want a chance to earn back your trust. If you'd let me, I'll do anything." Sophia's heart pounded as she fought a tempest of emotions. She wanted to scream at him for his selfishness, for how easily he had dismissed her when Carla appeared. She wanted to hate him for throwing away their marriage. And yet, in the quiet corner of her soul, she recognized the sincerity of his remorse. "Do you still see Carla?" Sophia asked, her voice catching. "I've been trying to distance myself for weeks," he said, swallowing hard. "She won't go quietly, Sophia. She's threatened. She's threatened to sue me, blackmail me, everything. But I'm done with her. I promise." Despite herself, a spark of concern for Anthony flickered within her. It was the caretaker in her, the woman who had shared years of her life with him, that felt a pang of empathy. But she hadn't forgotten the searing pain of betrayal. She stared at the man she had once called her soulmate, wondering whether his desperation was real, or if it was just fear of losing the comfortable stability she had provided. Outside the door, Mark and Caldwell waited. The clock ticked audibly in the quiet conference room. Finally, Sophia spoke, her voice resonating with a newfound strength. "I won't make any promises," she said, "but I'll speak with you again. For now, let's keep this meeting to asset distribution. We'll revisit everything else later." Anthony's shoulders sagged, as though some heavy burden had temporarily lifted. He nodded, and a glimmer of hope flashed across his face. "Thank you," he whispered. She only nodded, pressing her lips together as she struggled to maintain composure. With that, she signalled for Mark and Caldwell to re-enter the room, each returning to their respective seats. In the chilly, formal atmosphere of the law firm, the process of dividing a life's worth of shared dreams began. But in the undercurrent, something else stirred, a hint of redemption perhaps, or an echo of a love that refused to be entirely silenced. Carla Moreno was not one to relinquish power quietly. When she learned of Sophia's return to Lexington Heights, and more importantly that Anthony was entertaining the possibility of reconciliation, a storm of jealousy and rage consumed her. She confronted Anthony one night in his penthouse, having tracked him down after he ignored her calls all evening. "So you're just done with me?" she spat, eyes flashing. She stood in the doorway, a glossy fur coat draped over her slender shoulders, her hair dishevelled from the night's windy snowfall. "I'm done with the lies," Anthony replied, weariness etched in his voice. "I want out, Carla. This isn't working." She scoffed, stepping forward. "Oh, you think you can just throw me away like an old toy now that your precious wife is back in town? Think again, Anthony." She lowered her voice, her words dripping venom. "If you try to cut me off, I'll make sure everyone hears about how you manipulated me, about all the money you funneled into my accounts to keep me quiet. I'll drag your name through every gossip column in the country." Anthony's temper flared. "Don't you dare pin this on me. You wanted this. You pushed for it. And don't pretend you care about me. You just care about my money." Carla's eyes narrowed into icy slits. For a moment, Anthony worried she might lash out physically, but she simply dropped her fur coat onto a nearby chair, marched up to him, and poked a manicured finger into his chest. "Don't you dare try to rewrite history. You chased me, Anthony. You said you wanted me in your life, that you'd do anything for me. And now that I've built a new life here, you want to take it all away?" Her lips curled in disdain. "You owe me." Before Anthony could respond, she brushed past him and sat down on the leather sofa, crossing her legs. "I want a settlement," she said, eyes locked on his. "Enough to maintain my lifestyle, or else I go public." Anthony clenched his fists, rage mixing with shame. He sank into an armchair, burying his face in his hands. How had he let it get to this point? His empire, his family, his reputation, all were on the line. He looked up, steeling himself. "Fine," he said at last. "I'll have Caldwell draft something, but don't expect miracles." Carla's lip twitched in a half-smile. She grabbed her coat, stood up, and sauntered toward the door, casting a mocking glance over her shoulder. "I knew you'd see sense. You always have, darling." As her footsteps receded down the hallway, Anthony felt a wave of disgust wash over him. Disgust at Carla, yes, but mostly at himself. In a matter of months he had destroyed the life he'd built with Sophia. Now he was dancing on strings pulled by a woman who had no qualms about holding him hostage, emotionally and financially. He grabbed his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found Sophia's number, heart pounding. He stared at it, longing to call, but he also knew it was too soon. How could he ask her for a second chance when he was still entangled in Carla's threats? After a sleepless night, Anthony met with Caldwell the next morning to discuss a potential settlement for Carla. Caldwell was wary, warning that a large payout might embolden her or lead to further demands. But Anthony couldn't see another way out. He needed Carla gone, for good, if he had any hope of making amends with Sophia or even preserving some shred of dignity. Behind the scenes, Sophia was finishing her last round of meetings with Mark. She had secured her share of the marital assets, enough to be comfortable and to continue her philanthropic work, even if she decided to relocate permanently to Chicago. The question remained, was she ready to close the door on Anthony forever? A swirl of conflicting emotions weighed on her as she walked through the city's wintry streets. She recalled Anthony's contrite expression at the law firm, the genuine sorrow in his eyes. Yet she also remembered every tear she shed, every humiliating moment when she realized she had been replaced by another woman. Mark, sensing her turmoil, advised her to take her time. "You don't have to decide now," he said, "but don't forget what led you to this point." That night, as a fresh snowfall coated the city, Sophia found herself standing outside the iron gates of the Lancaster mansion. She had come here almost on autopilot, drawn by memories and the need for closure. The gates were locked, the driveway empty. She stared through the bars at the large silhouette of the home she had once lovingly decorated, where she and Anthony used to plan their future together. A flood of emotion overcame her. She fought the urge to break down, to crumple in the snow. Instead, she turned away, determined to find her own path, with or without Anthony Lancaster. Days later, Sophia received an unexpected phone call. Anthony's voice quivered on the other end. "Sophia, it's me," he said, hesitating. "I've ended things with Carla, officially. Caldwell is working out details. She won't be part of our lives anymore." Sophia's heart pounded. The finality in his tone suggested a real change, though she remained cautious. "I'm not sure what you want me to say," she replied. "I know I have no right to ask you for anything," he continued, "but I want to see you, one last time, or maybe more if you're willing." Her silence spoke volumes. Memories of their life together collided with memories of her anguish. At length, she sighed. "Fine," she whispered, "but I make no promises." They met at a discreet restaurant outside Lexington Heights, where the glow of candlelight softened the tension between them. Anthony had arrived early, and when Sophia walked in, he stood to greet her, hands trembling. She noticed a vulnerability about him, a humility she hadn't seen in years. After ordering tea and coffee, they sat, an awkward quiet draping over them. Finally, Anthony spoke, his voice husky with emotion. "I'm sorry," he said, face etched with regret. "I don't know if you can ever forgive me, or even if you should, but I need you to know how deeply I regret everything." Sophia studied him, tears pooling in her eyes. "I don't think you understand how badly you hurt me. I trusted you with my life. You broke that trust in the cruelest way." He reached across the table haltingly, and this time she didn't pull away. His hand found hers, and she felt the warmth of his touch, a reminder of happier times. "I'm not asking for forgiveness all at once," he said quietly. I love you. I want to spend the rest of my days proving that to you, if you'll let me." For a moment, the world seemed to slow, as if fate itself paused to listen. Sophia searched his eyes for any trace of the arrogance and selfishness that had destroyed their marriage. Instead, she found a broken man, one who appeared sincere in his desire to make amends. She squeezed his hand gently. "Anthony," she began, "I don't know if I can ever love you the same way, but a part of me still cares for you, maybe always will." She wiped a tear from her cheek. "I can't promise we'll be what we once were, but if you truly want to earn back my trust, we can try." Emotions flooded Anthony's face: hope, relief, gratitude. In that small, intimate restaurant, they decided on the first step, a form of counseling, an honest dialogue that might help them pick up the shattered pieces. In the ensuing weeks, they attended couples therapy sessions, each bearing their vulnerabilities. Anthony opened up about feeling pressured by his success and seeking excitement in the wrong places. Sophia confessed how lonely she had felt, her identity swallowed by Anthony's vast ambition. They tread delicately, mindful that any chance at renewal required confronting the raw pain of betrayal. Carla Moreno, meanwhile, accepted a significant payout, severed her ties with Anthony, and vanished into the frenetic world of international travel and high society. Rumors placed her in Monaco or Dubai or the south of France, with a new companion each time. But Anthony no longer cared about her whereabouts. His focus had shifted entirely to saving the marriage he had nearly destroyed. The final scene of their reconciliation took place in the Lancaster mansion, A home tainted by sorrow, but still echoing with memories of genuine love. Sophia stood by the grand piano she had once adored, lightly touching its keys as Anthony watched from the doorway. "I haven't played in so long," she said, her voice trembling with nostalgia. Anthony walked over and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "Play something," he urged softly. She gazed at him, her eyes filled with a tentative hope. Slowly, she sat down and began to play a simple melody, her fingers finding their way across the keys. The notes flowed, tentative at first, then gathering conviction, filling the cavernous space with a haunting beauty. Anthony closed his eyes, tears streaming down his cheeks, letting the music wash over him, a poignant reminder of the love they once shared. When the final chord faded, Sophia turned to Anthony, and he knelt before her, taking her hands into his. "I will spend every day proving I'm worthy of another chance," he whispered, voice thick with emotion. "If you ever doubt me, tell me, and I'll do everything in my power to show you I've changed." She nodded, her tears mingling with his. "We still have a lot of work to do," she said, voice trembling. "But maybe we can heal together." And in that moment, with the last echoes of the piano still lingering in the air, they both realized that the road to redemption was long. The scars of betrayal would never fully vanish, but under the glow of a winter sunset filtering through the mansion's stained-glass windows, Anthony and Sophia embraced, choosing hope over despair. Despite the tragedies, the manipulations, and the heartbreak, love, deep, abiding love, found a way to take root once more. In the years that followed, the story of Anthony Lancaster and Sophia became something of a legend in Lexington Heights, a cautionary tale of how power and temptation can corrupt, but also a testament to the resilience of love. Anthony sold the penthouse he had once gifted Carla, donating most of the proceeds to Sophia's charities. He also quietly stepped back from his more ostentatious circles, refocusing his energy on rebuilding trust with Sophia and supporting projects that genuinely helped others. Sophia, though scarred by betrayal, found new strength in the adversity she had faced. She expanded her philanthropic work, founding a new foundation focused on supporting women who had suffered from infidelity and divorce. She also returned to her passion for music, performing intimate piano recitals at charity events. Over time, the foundation gained national recognition, and she found a renewed sense of purpose and identity. Their marriage, forever changed by the events that tore them apart, evolved into a different kind of bond, a cautious, deliberate commitment. They established clear boundaries, attended therapy regularly, and never shied away from the hard conversations about trust and transparency. For Anthony, every moment with Sophia was a chance to prove he was no longer the man who so callously cast her aside. For Sophia, each day was a step toward forgiving herself for ever believing she wasn't enough. Occasionally, in the hushed corners of society galas, one might still hear a whisper of Carla Moreno's name, an unconfirmed rumor of her latest escapade in some distant city, but the spectre of her hold on Anthony and Sophia had long dissipated. She became little more than a footnote in the unfolding story of two people who chose to fight for a love that, although battered, refused to die. People often asked Anthony how he managed to win Sophia back. In those moments he would smile ruefully and say, "I didn't win her. I was given grace beyond what I deserved, and that's something I'll never take for granted again." In the grand scheme of life, redemption is never guaranteed. It is earned through humility, sacrifice, and the unwavering dedication to repair what was broken. For Anthony Lancaster and his wife Sophia, redemption arrived like a fragile seed planted in scorched earth, fragile yet full of potential, waiting to be nurtured into something stronger and more beautiful than what had existed before. In the end, the cost was high and the journey arduous. But they found their way, proving that even amid the ashes of betrayal, love can spark anew. In the end, Anthony Lancaster learned the hard way that some mistakes can't be undone, and not every love story gets a second chance. He lost everything chasing a fantasy, only to realize that the real treasure had been beside him all along. But life has a way of teaching us lessons, whether we're ready for them or not. And for Anthony, redemption wasn't just about winning Sophia back. It was about proving every single day that he had changed. Was it enough? Only time would tell. If you enjoyed this story and want more drama, twists, and life-changing moments, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. There's so much more to come, and you won't want to miss it. Hit that subscribe button now, and stay tuned for the next story.
He was the dashing mogul every ambitious entrepreneur wanted to emulate. She was the poised, loyal wife who had stood by him from humble beginnings. No one would have guessed that behind the gated mansion's manicured lawns, betrayal festered like poison. Until one day, in a flurry of financial sabotage, he let his mistress cut off his wife's credit cards. It was humiliating, scandalous, and only the beginning of a whirlwind that would pit powerful business alliances against each other. In a boardroom confrontation that stunned everyone, the CEO himself stepped in, but not in the way anyone expected. Buckle up. This is the story of love, greed, and revenge. Jordan Alberts was not born into luxury. He grew up in a cramped one-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of Milwaukee, where he learned to hustle by selling candy bars door to door at the age of 10. Over the years, Jordan's unwavering determination and charm propelled him into better circles. First at a local startup, then into his own tech company that caught the eye of an angel investor. By the time he was 35, Jordan was a self-made millionaire, a prominent figure on various entrepreneurial boards, and had connections with people like Mark Cuban, Bill Gates, and a few top executives at Google. His wife, Elizabeth Alberts née Wagner, had been with him through everything. They met in college at a small tech entrepreneur club meeting, both bright-eyed and dreaming of changing the world. Elizabeth came from a modest background, too. Her father was a retired auto mechanic, and her mother a homemaker. She'd studied communications with an emphasis on public relations, and it was through Elizabeth's network of contacts that Jordan first gained access to small local pitch events. While Jordan pitched his innovative software for automating small business tasks, Elizabeth made calls, arranged coffee meetups, and tried to capture the interest of potential backers. They married in a little chapel by Lake Michigan. It wasn't a lavish wedding, no star-studded guest list, no fancy reception at the Ritz. But to Jordan and Elizabeth, it felt perfect. A union built on genuine love, unwavering support, and a shared dream of building a life and a business empire together. Over the next decade, they grew from a modest condominium in Milwaukee to a stunning estate in Austin near Lake Travis, with a sweeping view of the water and rolling Texas hills. It was there at a philanthropic event organized by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation that Jordan's name landed on the radar of top-level investors. His company's smart automation technology was recognized for its potential to transform not just small businesses, but large-scale manufacturing and logistics. Soon after, Jordan's net worth skyrocketed from a mere $5 million to well over $200 million. For a while, everything was picture perfect. The marriage was strong, their personal synergy unwavering. Elizabeth handled some philanthropic duties, organizing events, acting as a goodwill ambassador for Jordan's brand, and forging new partnerships through her PR background. Their household staff adored them, describing Elizabeth as kind, gracious, and always mindful of the people around her. But money can be a seductive force, and success can open doors to darker temptations. Jordan began attending more exclusive networking events in Beverly Hills, New York, and beyond. Elizabeth was often at his side, but there were times she couldn't attend. Perhaps she was busy finalizing the details for a charity gala, or maybe she was simply burnt out from the unrelenting schedule. It was during these times, rare at first, then increasingly common, that Jordan got close to someone else. Her name was Ava Monroe. She was a rising star in the world of technology law, representing high-profile clients like Tesla, Amazon, and a few top-tier cryptocurrency exchanges. She had a reputation for being ruthless in negotiations, seductive in social gatherings, and unbelievably charming behind closed doors. The rumor mill started buzzing the moment Ava was seen at Jordan's table during a private dinner after a tech summit in Las Vegas. Elizabeth wasn't there. She had chosen to stay in Austin, meeting with a team of female entrepreneurs Jordan was mentoring. A few people whispered about Jordan's visible fascination with Ava, the way he leaned in whenever she spoke, how they clinked champagne flutes with an intimacy that suggested more than just business talk. No one knew for certain how fast or how deep it went, but soon the signs became undeniable. Lavish gifts appeared on Ava's social media, including a diamond bracelet, suspiciously similar to the ones Jordan's company had once gifted important clients. Photos emerged of Jordan and Ava at high-end restaurants in Manhattan, always carefully angled to obscure Jordan's face, though keen observers could still identify him by the sliver of a recognizable watch or the faint reflection in a mirrored wall. By the time the rumors reached Elizabeth, they were no longer rumors, but near-confirmed facts. She felt her chest tighten, her world spinning out of control. This couldn't be real. Jordan had always been a loyal partner. But the evidence was too compelling to deny. She confronted him in the privacy of their Lakeview mansion. At first, Jordan denied everything. Yet denial quickly turned into a half-hearted admission once Elizabeth presented him with photographic evidence. Like a skilled negotiator used to controlling deals, Jordan tried to manipulate the situation, insisting that Ava was just a business associate, someone he occasionally had dinner with. But Elizabeth saw right through it. She had always been adept at reading him. A chill settled over their once loving home. Elizabeth, determined to preserve her dignity, demanded they enter marriage counseling, or at the very least step away from high-profile events until they resolved their issues in private. Jordan nodded, providing non-committal answers. He had never liked therapy, never seen the point in discussing feelings with a stranger. He agreed to her wishes on the surface, yet beneath the facade, he continued his involvement with Ava, allowing the illicit relationship to take root. This was the calm before the storm. For soon Elizabeth's sense of betrayal would pale in comparison to the massive financial and emotional blow about to come her way. Weeks passed. Elizabeth tried to focus on her philanthropic work and personal projects, attempting to distract herself from the growing chasm between her and Jordan. When a local charity she sponsored invited her to discuss future donations, Elizabeth discovered something shocking. Her personal credit card was declined. Embarrassment washed over her in front of the unsuspecting staff. She tried another card. Sure, it must have been a glitch, but that too was declined. The staff politely suggested she call her bank, and Elizabeth excused herself with a polite smile, her hands trembling as she left the office. Elizabeth called the bank suspecting fraud or an administrative error. But the bank's representative informed her that both cards had been cancelled the previous week. Under their joint account, they were tied to Jordan's finances, and evidently Jordan had authorized the cancellation. It felt like a punch to the gut. Why on earth would Jordan cancel her cards without her knowledge or consent? They had never had major financial disputes. Elizabeth always had access to family funds, albeit responsibly. She dialed Jordan, but the call went straight to voicemail. She sent him several frantic texts. No response. Later that evening, Jordan came home exuding an air of tired disinterest. Elizabeth confronted him the moment he walked through the door. Under the chandelier's glow, which reflected in her tear-filled eyes, Jordan brushed aside her questions with a dismissive wave. "I needed to consolidate our finances," he said, removing his blazer. "You can use the joint checking account for a while." "No big deal, no big deal." Elizabeth's frustration swelled. "You cancelled my credit cards without even telling me what's going on. Are you punishing me for something?" Jordan's eyes flicked away nervously, and that was when Elizabeth realized he was lying again. The next words that came from his mouth were not only shocking, but also laced with a cruelty she never imagined he was capable of. "Ava suggested we revisit some of my expenses. She found that you were spending frivolously. It made sense to limit credit usage." Elizabeth's heart dropped to her stomach. Ava. That woman was now meddling in their finances. As if the affair wasn't enough, Jordan had allowed this mistress to encroach into an arena that Elizabeth believed was sacred, her own household stability. "What is Ava doing reviewing my spending? Since when does your fling get to decide what is or isn't frivolous?" Elizabeth spat tears, threatening to spill. Jordan made an attempt at a calming gesture, but his words only fanned the flames. "She's helping me restructure. Her firm has great insights into corporate finances. This is about the business, Elizabeth. It's not personal." Not personal. Elizabeth recalled how intimately personal their marriage had always been. They built every aspect of their lives together, from small decisions about wallpaper colors to big entrepreneurial leaps that demanded everything from both of them. Now Jordan was shutting her out, consulting Ava instead. In a quavering voice, Elizabeth demanded, "Reinstate my cards. I am your wife. I have a right to our finances, and you know I've never been irresponsible with money." Jordan's face hardened with a new arrogance. "Not until we finalize our restructure," he said, referring to some nebulous plan Elizabeth knew little about. "I'll handle everything in the meantime." That moment, that cold exchange, was a harbinger of the bigger heartbreak to come. If Jordan was letting Ava control such details, what other aspects of their marriage was he willing to let her sabotage? As the days turned into weeks, Elizabeth discovered one more blow after another. The monthly allowance she used to cover household expenses had been slashed without explanation. The staff, including her personal assistant, was laid off. Bills began piling up, addressed to her name, but with no means to pay them aside from groveling at Jordan's feet. Friends and family started to notice. Elizabeth tried to hide her shame. She confided in her sister Caroline, who was enraged at Jordan. "This is financial abuse," Caroline insisted. "You should speak to a lawyer." Elizabeth shuddered at the thought. She still believed they could salvage their relationship, that Jordan would snap out of whatever daze Ava had put him in. Yet a small part of her whispered that maybe Caroline was right. Then came a fateful meeting at a hotel conference suite in Los Angeles, one that Jordan had insisted Elizabeth attend. It was a gathering of major tech moguls, including Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk, who were rumored to be there to discuss new tech innovations in global logistics. When Elizabeth arrived, she quickly realized something was off. She saw Jordan in the lounge area, standing far too close to Ava, exchanging hushed conversations. Seeing Elizabeth from a distance, Jordan slipped away discreetly, leaving Ava behind. Elizabeth approached her husband with a forced smile. "I'm here," she said, desperate to maintain composure. "What's the plan?" Jordan gave a curt nod. "There's a closed-door session for the key players only. You'll have to wait outside." In the past, Elizabeth had always been included in these key player sessions, as Jordan's partner and PR advisor. The subtle exclusion burned her pride. She swallowed her anger. "Sure, I can wait." After hours of waiting, she found Jordan and Ava laughing together near the bar. As she approached, Jordan's phone buzzed, and he stepped away. That was when Ava turned a chilling smirk on her face. "You know Jordan's a visionary," Ava said, swirling the wine in her glass. "He needs someone who can keep up with him on all levels: business, ambition, excitement." Elizabeth felt her face flush with anger. "I've been by his side for years. We built this together." Ava gave a theatrical shrug. "Maybe in the past. But times change. People evolve. I guess you were too comfortable." Elizabeth clenched her fists, biting back a retort. She was determined not to make a scene in front of such influential people. But oh, how she wanted to lash out to expose Ava for the home wrecker she was. Ava flicked her hair behind her shoulder, noticing Elizabeth's agitation. "Things will be better if you accept it," she cooed, as if offering advice to a friend. Jordan's moved on in more ways than one. The finances are just the beginning. Elizabeth's body went cold. She realized in that moment how truly precarious her situation was. Ava was not simply a fling. She was positioning herself as a partner in Jordan's professional and personal life. The credit cards were just one step in what looked like a systematic campaign to push Elizabeth out of everything she and Jordan had built. Still, Elizabeth refused to crumble. She left the event quietly, but her mind churned with rage and heartbreak. It was time for her to take action. She needed to protect herself, her assets, and her dignity. Little did she know that as she plotted her next move, Jordan and Ava were preparing a financial ambush that would push her to the brink. Only fate and an unexpected intervention by a certain CEO would alter the course of their twisted game. In the days after the Los Angeles conference, Elizabeth attempted to consult with attorneys. She picked up a referral from a friend who once worked with a high-profile divorce lawyer in New York. The initial phone calls were sobering, with Jordan's empire being primarily under his name and her credit cards cancelled. She had limited liquidity to hire top-tier representation. Even so, Elizabeth pressed forward. She managed to scrape together some funds from a personal savings account. Jordan had no access to money she had set aside from her early PR consulting days. It wasn't a large sum, but enough to secure a preliminary consultation. During that consultation, her lawyer, Michelle Liu, a bright and empathetic but hard-hitting attorney based in Houston, laid out the hard truth. Financial abuse and infidelity are serious grounds for divorce, Michelle said, scanning through Elizabeth's financial statements. But if Jordan's funneling money and assets into new accounts under his own name, or shifting resources to places you can't see, we need proof, and we need it fast. Elizabeth swallowed. She recounted Ava's involvement, how she was effectively orchestrating the restructuring. Michelle's pen scribbled quickly over a notepad. "You have a right to half of the marital assets, Elizabeth, but it looks like your husband is 2 steps ahead. We must move quickly." The plan was to gather evidence of Jordan's wrongdoing and file a court order to freeze marital assets, ensuring Elizabeth had a fair shot. But as they began drafting documents and rummaging through what records, Elizabeth had an avalanche of shocking details surfaced. Jordan wasn't merely cancelling credit cards. He was transferring stocks from their joint portfolio into an account under his newly formed trust. He had changed the authorized signatory details for a few of their properties, effectively locking Elizabeth out. He was also taking out lines of credit against certain properties, presumably to fund new ventures that, as Elizabeth suspected, involved Ava. The emotional strain weighed heavily on Elizabeth. She couldn't sleep, her appetite waned. Each day felt like standing at the center of a storm. Yet if she thought this was the worst of it, she was mistaken. One evening, after finalizing some documents with Michelle, Elizabeth returned to her mansion to find her keycard didn't work on the electronic locks. Pounding on the door, she shouted for the live-in staff if any were left. Seconds later, the door opened slightly, revealing Ava's face. "Jordan's not here," Ava said icily. "You should call next time." Elizabeth's heart hammered. "This is my home. Get out of my way," she demanded, trying to push past. But Ava slid in front of her, refusing to budge. "He told me you're not welcome here anymore until the legal mess is settled," Ava sneered. "I have every right to ask you to leave." Elizabeth was trembling with fury. "You have no rights here. You're the mistress, not the wife." With a cold laugh, Ava stepped aside and pointed at Elizabeth's luggage haphazardly placed in the foyer. "Jordan left these for you," she said. "He said to pack whatever else you need and let security escort you out if you refuse to leave." Elizabeth blinked away tears, her throat raw with outrage. She was being thrown out of her own home by the woman who had intruded into her marriage. That moment was a cruel epiphany. Jordan had not only cut off her finances, but now he was physically pushing her out of the place she had shared with him for years. Yet in all that darkness, a sliver of light emerged the next morning. Elizabeth received a phone call from a close mutual friend, Marcus O'Donnell, who worked with Jordan at a large tech conglomerate in Dallas. Marcus was someone Elizabeth trusted, an executive who had known Jordan since the early days. He had seen them build the company from the ground up. Elizabeth Marcus said, his tone urgent. "I don't know everything that's going on, but I heard from your staff that you've been locked out. There's a board meeting next week. Jordan wants to finalize some big decisions. If you can get to that meeting and talk to the chairman, maybe you can find some leverage." Elizabeth's breath caught in her chest. The chairman of this particular conglomerate was none other than famed CEO David Hartridge, known not just for his visionary leadership, but also for a strict code of ethics. Over the years, Hartridge had invested heavily in Jordan's business. He was the reason Jordan sat on that board. "He's not the type to meddle in personal affairs," Marcus warned. "But if Jordan's pulling stunts that compromise your share in the company, Hartridge might step in. He's big on fairness and hates scandal." It was the glimmer of hope Elizabeth needed. She thanked Marcus profusely. The plan was simple: attend the board meeting, confront Jordan in front of Hartridge, and present enough evidence of Jordan's wrongdoing to ensure the board and possibly the entire conglomerate would not stand for it. She spent the week gathering documents, bank statements, and text message screenshots that implicated Jordan in unscrupulous financial moves. Michelle Liu helped compile everything into a neat folder. "You need to be prepared for Jordan to lash out," Michelle warned. "He'll try to discredit you in front of the board." Elizabeth nodded her determination, overshadowing her fear. She practiced her speech, reciting it in the mirror of her modest hotel room, where she had temporarily moved. Heart pounding, she told herself that if there was ever a time to fight, it was now. Finally, the day of the board meeting arrived. Elizabeth dressed in a sleek black pantsuit that radiated confidence. She walked into the corporate skyscraper in downtown Dallas, her chin held high despite the knot in her stomach. She spotted Jordan in the corridor, flanked by Ava and a couple of the board members. As soon as he saw Elizabeth, his expression darkened. "You're not supposed to be here," Jordan said, trying to keep his voice low. Elizabeth raised her chin. "I'm still an investor in your company. I hold shares." "So yes, I'm attending the board meeting." Ava stepped in with a condescending smile. "Don't make a scene, Elizabeth. This meeting is for serious stakeholders." "I am a serious stakeholder," Elizabeth retorted, voice steady. "I'm your wife, still legally, and I'm half of this empire's foundation." Behind them, a tall figure approached, CEO David Hartridge himself, a man in his 50s with greying temples and a firm handshake. He regarded Elizabeth with polite curiosity. "Ms. Alberts, I presume?" Elizabeth nodded, handing over her invitation papers and a letter from her attorney, which stated that she possessed partial shares. Hartridge studied the documents, then gave a curt nod indicating she was allowed to attend. Jordan shot Elizabeth a glare that spoke volumes. You have no idea what you're getting into. But Elizabeth did. She was here to preserve her dignity, her livelihood, and the legacy she had helped build. The meeting commenced in a sleek conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Dallas skyline. The board members sat around a large mahogany table, exchanging pleasantries about the upcoming quarter's projections. Jordan made a short presentation on a new partnership with a logistics firm, highlighting expansions and new contracts. A few board members clapped. Then came time for open discussion. Elizabeth raised her hand, clearing her throat. "I'd like to address some concerns about the financial structuring Jordan is proposing." She began, her voice reverberating across the silent room. Jordan's face reddened. Ava, seated beside him, tried to intervene. "We should keep personal matters out of board discussions," she said. But Elizabeth pressed on, raising the folder of evidence. "These changes aren't just personal," Elizabeth said. "They could affect company stability. Jordan is funneling resources into a new trust, making questionable decisions without transparency. I have documents signed by him with references to Ms. Ava Monroe, demonstrating a conflict of interest that could potentially compromise investor trust." A hush fell over the room. Hartridge's brow creased. "Jordan, is this true?" Jordan stood, scrambling for composure. "This is a personal matter. Elizabeth is overstepping her bounds." "She's not." Hartridge replied, his voice sharp. "If there's a conflict of interest that threatens the stability of our partnership, it's very much a board matter." Jordan's eyes darted between Hartridge and Elizabeth. For the first time, he seemed cornered, uncertain how to proceed. Ava shot Elizabeth a lethal glare, realizing that Elizabeth's boldness had forced the topic into official territory. The tension was palpable. Elizabeth's heart thumped so loudly, she was certain everyone could hear it. But she stood her ground. Continuing. "I also discovered lines of credit being taken against marital properties to fund expansions. These expansions could be legitimate, but the details are obscured. I have reason to believe Ms. Monroe is manipulating these finances for her personal gain." Murmurs rippled through the board. A couple members exchanged uneasy glances. Even those who might have sided with Jordan seemed rattled by the magnitude of Elizabeth's accusations. Hartridge steepled his fingers, evaluating the situation. "I propose we recess for 15 minutes. Jordan, Elizabeth, Ms. Monroe, please step into my office." Jordan inhaled frustration etched across his features, but he couldn't refuse the CEO's request, not without causing a catastrophic scene. The three followed Hartridge into a glass-walled corner office, shutting the door behind them. In that tense, enclosed space, the real battle began. Elizabeth laid out her evidence on the polished table before Hartridge. Jordan tried to dismiss it all as a personal dispute, but Hartridge was no fool. He could see the potential for scandal, especially if a partner was using company infrastructure for personal vendettas. Throughout this heated exchange, Ava attempted to deflect blame. She portrayed herself as a legal advisor, merely suggesting financial moves disclaiming any wrongdoing. But Elizabeth's carefully compiled documents suggested otherwise. Emails, text messages, and proposed legal documents bore Ava's digital fingerprints. Hartridge's expression darkened. "Jordan, this is unacceptable. If these documents are authentic, you've put your personal entanglements ahead of corporate responsibility. I won't allow it under my leadership." Jordan's face went pale. He tried to protest, to label Elizabeth's claims as overblown, but Hartridge had already made up his mind. "Until this is sorted out, Jordan, I'm placing your proposals on hold. We can't move forward with any major financial changes if they're under this sort of ethical cloud." Elizabeth felt a surge of relief, a faint vindication. While she hadn't resolved the core issue of Jordan's betrayal, at least the board wasn't letting him run roughshod over her financial future. But Jordan, cornered and embarrassed, lashed out in desperation. "You can't shut me down like this," he snapped at Hartridge, voice tight with anger. "I'm the one who made that original deal with your conglomerate. You need my innovation." Hartridge stood up, bristling at Jordan's tone. "I'm the CEO, and you've just made me question your reliability and integrity. Watch yourself, Jordan." Ava stepped closer to Jordan, placing a hand on his arm to calm him, but he shrugged her off. "You'll regret this," he warned Hartridge, then turned to Elizabeth. "And you made a fool of me in front of everyone." Elizabeth clenched her fists, refusing to cower. "You did that to yourself," she said, voice trembling with both fear and resolve. Jordan stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Ava followed quickly, her heels clicking on the marble floor. Hartridge sighed, looking at Elizabeth, who was holding back tears. "Thank you for bringing this to my attention," Hartridge said. "I'm sorry about your personal struggles, but I have to protect the board's interests. If you need anything, contact my office. I'm not a family court judge, but I won't let Jordan drag the company down." With that, Elizabeth let out a shaky breath. She had achieved a small but crucial victory, yet she couldn't shake the nagging sense that Jordan, humiliated and cornered, was far from finished. She left the skyscraper, stepping out into the bright Dallas sun, uncertain, but determined. Little did she know this chapter was only the start of a far more explosive confrontation, one that would involve security teams, sudden betrayals, and a twist that would bring Jordan himself to his knees. Life outside the mansion was lonely, but Elizabeth was thankful for the reprieve from Ava's manipulations. She rented a small apartment near downtown Austin and used what funds she had left to secure her basic needs, while Michelle continued to press for a financial freeze on Jordan's assets. In the weeks following the tense board meeting, Jordan went surprisingly quiet. No more legal letters arrived. No more credit lines were sabotaged. He didn't attempt to contact Elizabeth, nor did Ava. Instead, it seemed as though they had retreated into some silent fortress, likely strategizing their next move. Elizabeth took advantage of the lull. She reconnected with old friends and mentors, explaining partially at least what she was going through. While many were shocked, they offered support in the form of references, moral encouragement, and occasional leads for a stable job or a business partnership. Despite the heartbreak, Elizabeth discovered a renewed sense of purpose. She wasn't just a passive bystander in Jordan's world. She had her own capabilities, her own strengths. Slowly, she started consulting for small tech firms, using her communications and PR background to help them craft compelling pitches. It wasn't a fortune, but it was honest work that reminded her she could stand on her own 2 feet. Then one evening, she received a phone call from an unknown number. A crisp, professional voice greeted her. "Hello, Elizabeth. This is Patricia Carlson. I'm an executive assistant at Tesla, working under Elon Musk's leadership team." Elizabeth's heart thudded. She had met Patricia briefly at a tech conference in Berlin 2 years ago, but they'd never exchanged more than pleasantries. "How can I help you?" Elizabeth asked, mind racing. Patricia hesitated. "I might have information relevant to your predicament with Jordan. Let's just say some of our legal divisions have been observing Ava Monroe for a while, and some red flags have come up." Red flags. Elizabeth's curiosity flared. "You're investigating her?" A slow exhale from the other end. "Our major concern is that she's potentially engaged in insider trading, or at least something that veers close to it. She's been known to manipulate powerful men to gain inside info on deals, especially around new technologies. We don't have direct evidence, but we do know that she's heavily involved in your husband's finances. We suspect she might be siphoning resources for her own agendas." Elizabeth's mind reeled. This was bigger than a domestic spat. Ava might be leveraging Jordan's resources and connections to stake her own claims in the tech world. That explained the sudden shifts in finances, the new trust accounts, and the lines of credit. Patricia continued. "We want to bring her down, but we need more information. You, Elizabeth, might be in a unique position to gather that." Elizabeth tapped her fingers on the kitchen counter. "Isn't that something your legal team handles?" A rueful laugh. "Yes, but we need Jordan's direct involvement. We suspect he's unwittingly giving her access to confidential materials through corporate crossovers or joint ventures. If you can help us prove it, we can kill 2 birds with 1 stone, protect Tesla's proprietary data, and help you gain leverage in your divorce." Elizabeth considered the offer. It was risky. If Ava was truly up to something illegal, Elizabeth could expose herself to potential backlash, but the lure of finally getting the upper hand was strong. "I'll do what I can," Elizabeth replied cautiously. "But how do I communicate with you about this?" Patricia gave her a secure email address and instructions on how to encrypt files. "And one more thing," Elizabeth Patricia said, before hanging up. "People like Ava are cunning. She'll anticipate your every move. Don't trust phone lines or any device that Jordan has access to. Be careful." Elizabeth thanked her and ended the call. Adrenaline coursing through her. For the next few days, she scoured her digital archives for anything that might hint at insider information. Jordan's old messages about collaborations with major tech companies like Tesla or Amazon, documents that Ava might have manipulated anything that showed a trail of questionable activity. She found a few suspicious threads, forwarded emails from Jordan's corporate account that were CC'd to Ava's personal address. Attachments relating to Tesla's Project Next Gen battery were among them, though none of this was strictly proof of wrongdoing yet. Elizabeth compiled what she could and sent them to the secure email Patricia provided. In response, Patricia confirmed that these were valuable leads, but incomplete. "Keep digging," she urged, "and let me know if you get direct evidence of deals or monetary gains tied to these inside details." Meanwhile, Michelle Elizabeth's lawyer was preparing for a preliminary hearing to freeze some of Jordan's assets. She insisted Elizabeth come to court to testify about the financial abuse and the suspicious activities they had uncovered. But Jordan's side surprised them by agreeing to a partial freeze without argument. "That's strange," Michelle said, tapping a pen against the conference table. "Why would he agree so easily?" Elizabeth shrugged, perplexed. Maybe he realizes fighting me will look bad in front of the board. But Michelle wasn't convinced. I suspect he's preparing a bigger move. Be vigilant. He may have more leverage than we know. The next morning, Elizabeth received an unsolicited text from Jordan. We need to talk, face to face. She felt a swirl of conflicting emotions. Anger, sorrow, curiosity. But she knew she had to tread carefully. She agreed to meet him in a public place, a cafe near the courthouse, where she could keep the upper hand. When Jordan arrived, he looked tired, as though the weight of his troubles had worn him down. He offered a half-smile, which Elizabeth did not return. Liz? He began using the old nickname he once uttered, with affection. Things got out of hand. She crossed her arms. You think? He sighed, scanning her face for warmth that was no longer there. I want to settle this amicably. We can discuss spousal support, property divisions, everything. No need for a long, nasty court battle. Elizabeth let the silence hover. She wasn't naive enough to believe him at face value. Amicably. Are you telling me Ava is out of the picture? Jordan's shoulders tensed. This is about you and me, not her. Look, maybe I got carried away with Ava's advice. She's a brilliant attorney. She's manipulative, Elizabeth cut in sharply. He brushed the point aside. Regardless, I'm willing to compromise, but I need you to lay off this insider trading nonsense. It's reckless. You're endangering my reputation. Elizabeth realized then that Jordan knew she'd been snooping into his communications. Perhaps Tesla's legal inquiries had begun reverberating in his circle. She saw the fear in his eyes. He was worried, if not about losing her, then about losing his empire. You made me the enemy, Elizabeth replied, in a hushed, trembling tone. When you let your mistress cut off my cards and throw me out of my home. Jordan looked away, shame flickering on his face. I didn't handle that well. But you have to understand the pressure I'm under with these deals. She waited, letting him squirm. Then he continued. You'll get a fair share. I promise. I just need you to stop meddling in my professional affairs, especially with Tesla or any other major collaborators. You'll ruin me if you do. A bitter laugh escaped Elizabeth. She thought of all the times she had stood beside him, protecting him, representing him before powerful players, forging alliances that were crucial to his success. Now he was pleading for her, not to ruin him. The irony nearly choked her. Before she could respond, Jordan's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and muttered a soft curse. I have to go, he said, throwing some cash on the table for their untouched coffees. Elizabeth watched him leave a mixture of pity and disdain swirling in her stomach. It was obvious he was desperate, but was this a genuine attempt at reconciliation, or a ploy to keep her from uncovering more incriminating information about Ava? That question lingered as she returned to her apartment, drained. However, a new email from Patricia waited in her inbox. It contained an attachment, a partial timeline of suspicious trades linked to accounts rumored to be controlled by Ava Monroe. There were large bets placed on Tesla's stock ahead of public announcements. Gains in the tens of millions. This is huge, Elizabeth thought. If she connected these trades to emails or calls between Jordan and Ava, it could be the smoking gun. And while Elizabeth had no intention of going to the feds on her own, Tesla's legal team could bury Ava, and by extension, Jordan's complicity, if he was involved. Elizabeth clutched her phone, anxiety coursing through her. She was walking a razor's edge. One false step, and Jordan might retaliate more fiercely, or Ava might strike. But a successful strike against Ava could free Elizabeth from this entire ordeal, giving her the leverage to secure a fair divorce settlement, or even land Jordan in deeper trouble, depending on his role. She reached for her phone to text Patricia when it buzzed in her hand. A call from an unknown number again. Tentatively, Elizabeth answered. A man's voice greeted her calm and steady. "Hello, Ms. Alberts. My name is Gregory Shaw. I'm part of CEO David Hartridge's legal counsel. He asked me to follow up regarding the situation with your husband." Elizabeth's heart skipped. Hartridge's legal counsel. "We understand from Mr. Hartridge's conversation with you that there might be unethical or even illegal behavior in play," Gregory continued. "The board is concerned about potential liability if Jordan's personal dealings spill into our corporate structure. We can't risk another scandal. Mr. Hartridge would like to assist you discreetly." Elizabeth exhaled slowly. She was on the cusp of powerful alliances forming against Jordan and Ava, but the more people got involved, the more dangerous it felt. Gregory concluded, "We'll be in touch with your lawyer. If you have any crucial evidence, Mr. Hartridge suggests you keep it secure. He wants to avoid a public meltdown, but he's prepared to do what's necessary to protect the company's interests, and that includes supporting you in your legal disputes, if it comes to that." Hanging up. Elizabeth felt a measure of validation. The cracks in Jordan's seemingly untouchable world were growing. Perhaps justice would prevail. Yet as she prepared to finalize the next round of documents for Michelle, a gnawing worry kept her awake at night. Cornered animals are the most dangerous, and Jordan, though once gentle and loving, had shown he could be ruthless when threatened. She braced herself for the storm that was surely coming. The next time Elizabeth saw Jordan in person, it wasn't by chance or a carefully arranged meeting. It was at the headquarters of Hartridge's conglomerate in Dallas. A sudden emergency board session had been called to address urgent corporate matters, and Elizabeth, having been notified by Gregory Shaw, arrived prepared. She walked into the reception area, her heart pounding with anticipation. Michelle Liu had insisted on accompanying her, but at the last minute she was called to handle a crucial filing. Elizabeth went alone, relying on the moral support from Gregory and the knowledge that Hartridge wanted the truth on record. Jordan was already inside the boardroom with Ava, who paced like a clad tiger. When Elizabeth entered, they both snapped their heads in her direction. Ava's glare could have sliced glass. Jordan's face was inscrutable, tense, angry, but also tinged with fear. Hartridge arrived moments later, trailed by a few board members and legal advisors. He wasted no time in stating the purpose of the meeting. "Allegations have come to my attention that Ms. Monroe has been engaging in stock trades leveraging proprietary information from Jordan's company and potentially from our own collaborations. We need to clarify the truth. Now." Gasps and murmurs filled the room. Ava's jaw clenched. "This is preposterous," she began. "We demand to see your proof." Hartridge nodded to one of his advisors, who distributed printed documents, timelines of suspicious trades, tied to accounts flagged by Tesla's legal team, along with correspondences that Elizabeth and Patricia had pieced together. Jordan snatched a packet from the advisor. His eyes swept over the page's color, draining from his face. Ava's lips thinned, and for a moment Elizabeth could see the faintest flicker of panic in her eyes. Hartridge pinned them with a stern gaze. "Jordan, you've been a valuable partner. I don't want to see your personal life derail your professional standing, but this is bigger than your marriage. Insider trading is a federal crime, and if Ms. Monroe is using your business resources to pull this off, you're implicated." Ava recovered quickly. She placed a hand on Jordan's arm, her voice smooth. This is a misunderstanding, David. Anyone can align stock trades with corporate announcements. It's called speculation. Elizabeth decided enough was enough. She stood. Speculation is one thing, but forwarding private emails, entire business proposals, and preliminary press releases is not speculation. I've seen the messages. You're literally discussing the best times to execute trades based on announcements that hadn't been made public yet. Ava whirled on Elizabeth. You have no legal standing to claim that. You're just a scorned wife trying to sabotage Jordan and me. Elizabeth's blood boiled. We'll let the evidence speak. There are even time-stamped emails from Jordan's corporate account sent to your personal email, Ms. Monroe, discussing upcoming expansions and product launches. Then trades were executed in your name or trusts linked to you within hours. A hush followed. Jordan's hands shook slightly. He seemed torn between denial and guilt. After all, the evidence was damning. If he denied it outright, he'd appear foolish. But if he admitted his involvement, he risked criminal charges and the wrath of the board. Hartridge leaned forward, his voice firm. Jordan, I need answers. Were you aware of these trades? Jordan stared at the table, words refusing to form. Finally, he managed Ava said it was all above board, that it was just normal investing. Ava let out a short laugh, but it sounded hollow. If you want to scapegoat me, Jordan, think carefully, she warned. We made certain deals in your name as well. Your signatures are on plenty of documents. The entire boardroom seemed to hold its breath. Hartridge addressed one of his legal advisors. Have we sent this to the SEC? Not yet, the advisor responded. We wanted to confront them first. Jordan shot to his feet, panic etched on his face. No need to escalate it. We can handle this internally. If I undo the trades, repay any gains, repay tens of millions of dollars, Hartridge asked. And that would just be the tip of the iceberg if the SEC digs deeper. This is out of our hands if they launch a formal investigation. Elizabeth watched Jordan unravel. This was the man who had once been so composed, so unstoppable. Now he was cornered, sweat beading on his forehead. Ava, too, looked like a wild animal backed into a corner, eyes darting around the room. At that moment, a building security guard appeared at the door, knocking softly. Mr. Hartridge, you asked for security on standby, he announced quietly. Thank you, Hartridge replied, his tone like steel. I believe we might need you. Ava's eyes flitted towards the door, then back to Hartridge. She adopted a pleading tone. David, you know me. I've handled legal matters for some of the biggest players in the industry. I would never do anything to jeopardize your trust. Hartridge's face remained stony. I trusted Jordan, not you. And this evidence suggests you're at the center of a major ethical breach. If you don't have a verifiable explanation for each of these trades and how you obtained insider information, I have no choice but to protect the company from liability. Suddenly, Jordan snapped. Fear twisted into anger, and he pointed a trembling finger at Elizabeth. You did this. You ruined everything because you couldn't handle that I moved on. Elizabeth steadied her breathing, preparing to reply. But Hartridge cut in calm yet firm. Don't blame her for your poor decisions. You let your personal affair become a corporate liability. Something in Jordan cracked. He lunged toward Elizabeth as if to grab her documents or her phone, an irrational move likely spurred by desperation. But he never made contact. In a blink, the security guard stepped forward, and intercepted Jordan, gripping his arms. "Stand down, sir," the guard said, voice authoritative. Jordan struggled, but the guard was a solid wall of muscle. Ava shrieked. "Let him go." "This is a private matter." Hartridge shook his head, anger coloring his features. "You just attempted to assault someone in my boardroom. Security remove Mr. Alberts from the premises." Jordan's eyes widened in disbelief. "You can't do that. I'm on the board." "Not anymore," Hartridge said grimly. "I can and I will. You're suspended pending an internal investigation. Once that concludes, we'll determine your status. Now go and take Ms. Monroe with you." A second guard stepped in, guiding Ava toward the door as she protested threatening lawsuits and defamation claims. But her words rang hollow, overshadowed by the looming specter of an SEC investigation. Elizabeth stood off to the side, stunned by how quickly it had escalated from a tension-filled meeting to an outright meltdown. As Jordan and Ava were led out, Jordan craned his neck to shout at her, "You'll pay for this, Elizabeth. Don't think you've won." But the threat carried little weight now. In that moment, Elizabeth felt the mixture of triumph and sorrow that comes with toppling a man she once loved. She hadn't wanted to see Jordan destroyed, only to protect herself and the life they had built together. But Jordan's actions and Ava's ambition had forced her hand. Hartridge dismissed the board members, soon after instructing his legal team to cooperate fully with any investigations. He turned to Elizabeth with a sympathetic frown. "I'm sorry you had to endure this, Ms. Alberts. I assure you we'll handle it lawfully. Whatever personal or marital disputes remain, I hope you find closure." Elizabeth gave him a small nod. "Thank you. I appreciate your fairness." She gathered her documents and left the skyscraper, the bright Texas sun, striking her face as she stepped onto the street. The entire drama replayed in her mind. He let his mistress cut off my cards, but the CEO called security on him. She thought a bitter yet satisfying sense of irony spreading in her chest. She wasn't naive enough to think it was over. Legal battles would continue, depositions would be taken, and the divorce was far from final. But in this pivotal moment, she had taken back her power, standing against the storm that Jordan and Ava had unleashed. And for the first time in months, Elizabeth felt a glimmer of hope that she might in the end be free from their tyranny. In the weeks that followed, word spread like wildfire. News outlets picked up on rumors of insider trading linked to a high-profile tech investor, hinting that a major name was under investigation. It didn't take long for the rumor mill to connect the dots to Jordan Alberts and his mysterious attorney-turned-partner, Ava Monroe. Elizabeth watched from the sidelines, inundated with calls and messages from acquaintances, reporters, and sometimes even old college classmates she hadn't spoken to in years. She ignored most of them, preferring to let the legal process unfold without adding fuel to the media frenzy. Jordan, under immense legal and financial pressure, attempted to strike a deal if Elizabeth agreed to keep quiet and not testify against him or Ava. Regarding insider trading, he would give her a generous divorce settlement. The settlement included alimony, a hefty lump sum, and properties that would secure her financial future. However, Elizabeth refused any agreement that required her to lie or withhold the truth if subpoenaed. Nonetheless, she allowed her lawyer Michelle to work out a fair settlement that didn't involve perjury. Eventually, Jordan capitulated, realizing he had to salvage what he could from the marriage and business meltdown. The final settlement granted Elizabeth a significant portion of the assets, the mansion by Lake Travis, ironically. and a sizable share of Jordan's original tech startup. Meanwhile, Ava disappeared from the public eye, her reputation in tatters. Rumors surfaced that she'd fled the country perhaps to avoid legal repercussions, while others suggested she was hiding out in some luxury villa, waiting for the storm to pass. Either way, her days of meddling in Jordan's finances seemed to be over. Elizabeth didn't celebrate Jordan's downfall. She quietly grieved the end of a marriage that had started in love and partnership, yet she also felt relief and a renewed sense of self. She returned to the Lake Travis mansion, deciding whether to keep it or sell. The sweeping views of the water brought back memories, some of which felt like knives to her heart, others that warmed her soul. She began a new chapter in her life, leveraging her PR skills to start a consultancy focused on helping women entrepreneurs navigate both business and personal challenges. She named it Phoenix Rose Consulting, symbolizing rebirth and resilience. To her surprise, she found more joy in championing other women than she ever did, standing behind Jordan at glitzy galas. She kept in touch with Patricia from Tesla, who occasionally updated her on the ongoing investigations. Whether Jordan faced criminal charges depended on further evidence. But at least for Elizabeth, the immediate threat to her assets and well-being had lifted. David Hartridge reached out, once inviting Elizabeth to a dinner with the board, presumably to mend fences. Elizabeth politely declined. She had no desire to relive the tension of board meetings or navigate corporate politics, where her personal life became public fodder. She was grateful for Hartridge's stance, but preferred to build her future away from the chaos. In moments of solitude, Elizabeth reflected on the entire ordeal. She'd once believed that love, loyalty, and shared ambition could conquer anything. Yet she also realized that unchecked power and ego could corrode even the strongest of bonds. Jordan's betrayal had been a painful lesson, but it set her free to discover her own strengths and a life not tethered to someone else's rising star. Yes, heartbreak lingered, and healing was an ongoing process. But Elizabeth found herself waking each day with a sense of purpose. She'd gather with female founders at local co-working spaces, host workshops on media relations, and offer moral support to those feeling overshadowed by bigger players. Each time she saw a spark of confidence ignite in another woman's eyes, she felt her own sense of wholeness return. In time, Elizabeth would finalize the divorce, sign the deeds, and officially start over. A sense of calm settled within her, like the slow, tranquil waves on Lake Travis at dawn. Her story, the humiliating card cancellations, the public meltdown, the mistress's meddling, would become a cautionary tale, one she shared sparingly, only when it might help others. Despite the scars, Elizabeth refused to let bitterness define her. She chose growth empathy, and a belief that with the right support, anyone can rise from the ashes more formidable than before. Just as Elizabeth thought she had reached stable ground, fate tossed her another curveball. A month after the settlement, Michelle called her urgently. "The feds want to depose you," she said. They uncovered new evidence Jordan may be involved in deeper crimes, bribery, money laundering. Ava might have orchestrated a network. Elizabeth's stomach dropped. Jordan never mentioned anything like that. They've found offshore transactions and documents with his signature, Michelle said grimly. 2 days later, Elizabeth sat in a stark federal office, flanked by Michelle and 2 serious agents. They questioned her about Jordan's finances, Ava's role, the card cancellations, and philanthropic events that may have masked backdoor deals. Elizabeth stuck to the facts. She neither speculated nor dramatized. One agent, impressed, said, You've been very helpful, Miss Alberts. This case is significant. She left emotionally drained but relieved. She hadn't been dragged down with Jordan, but the storm wasn't over. Whispers followed. Jordan was hiding at a secluded ranch, dodging the press. Ava had vanished. More subpoenas were issued. An indictment loomed. Elizabeth stayed focused on her consultancy, channeling stress into helping other women navigate business pitfalls. Her story, once painful, became a symbol of warning and strength. Then came the headlines: Jordan Alberts indicted for insider trading, fraud, and obstruction. Ava was named but still missing. The scandal rocked the tech world. Elizabeth issued a single statement. I'm saddened by Jordan's choices. I've cooperated fully with authorities and continue to rebuild my life. Eventually, Jordan pled guilty to a lesser charge, offering a tearful courtroom apology. Elizabeth watched from home, tears in her eyes, not from triumph, but quiet grief for the man she once loved. Still, she understood consequences had to follow actions. That night, beneath the soft moonlight over Lake Travis, Elizabeth allowed herself one last cry for the past that died and the hope still waiting ahead. Life has a way of testing our fortitude when we least expect it. Elizabeth Alberts began this journey as a devoted wife, only to see her world upended by betrayal and financial sabotage. Yet what she lost in illusions, she gained in unbreakable resilience. Standing up to powerful forces and calling out wrongdoing isn't easy, but it's sometimes the only way to protect your dignity and your future. If you found this story gripping, insightful, or inspiring, we invite you to be a part of our community. Like this video, share it with friends who need a reminder that courage can emerge from chaos, and subscribe for more real-life drama and empowering tales. Let Elizabeth's story serve as a beacon, no matter how ruthless the betrayal. There's always a path to reclaim your power and build a brighter tomorrow. You too can rise like a phoenix.